Hi, what's up, everybody? Thanks for coming to Ami Brahma Community Discussions. It's not very often that we do a bit of teaching, but we are doing a bit of teaching today. Now, as you can see, the subject of our teaching today is love first. Now, it's love first beyond orthodoxy and orthoproxy. We're going to be doing some explanations of what that is. So my proposition today is that reclaiming Jesus as our primary example and thus love as the basis of all belief, obedience, and unity answers the age-old question of orthodoxy versus orthopraxy. Now, because we don't have anybody here with us to discuss it, we're only just going to be teaching, but by all means, comment below. When I'm finished with this, I'll be able to see your comments. We can strike up conversation as it suits. So, again, we want to reclaim Jesus as our primary example and thus love as the basis of all belief, obedience, and unity. We're going to talk a little bit about orthodoxy versus orthopraxy, give some definitions and the like here. So definitions: orthodoxy is the right or authorized belief. Orthopraxy, the right or authorized behavior. Now, there's some similarities and differences. In both cases, there's a strict conformity to both belief and behavior. In orthodoxy, belief is placed as the dominant of the two, asserting that without right belief, there can be no right behavior. And we'll get into some at least the initial verses and things like that here in a minute. Orthopraxy, behavior is the dominant of the two, asserting that without right behavior, there is no evidence of right belief. Now, a few temptations. We go straight to James 2:18. But someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without your deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. This is, of course, sort of what we would go to in favor of orthopraxy. But what this verse basically just says is that behavior reveals belief. It reveals whether or not you believe. So that sort of takes that out of the ring. Now, on the other side, on the side of orthodoxy, we tend to go straight to Romans 10:9. If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Now, this belief results in salvation. But neither of these two things take that note that the one gives birth to the other or the other way around. Now, the temptation then is to declare holy tension between faith and works. Now, holy tension tends to just mean this is above my pay grade. I'm not going to decide. And so we agree to disagree among ourselves and remain divided among the various divisions of Christianity. Now, what are the facts? The facts are that I want to touch first on 1 Corinthians 13 here. So, verse 1, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels but have not love, I am only a ringing gong or a clanging cymbal. Verse 2, if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have absolute faith so as to move mountains but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and exult in the surrender of my body but have not love, I gain nothing. So let's continue to look at the facts. How far do we fall short? Our language falls short. Our giftings fall short. Our faith falls short. Our generosity falls short. And our glory falls short. Romans 3:23. Now, these are all, of course, they fall short if we don't have love, which we will get to in a minute. But what do we have? What do we have all of, according to the scriptures? I have a small sampling here, but we have every spiritual blessing, Ephesians 1:2-4. We have everything for life and godliness, 2 Peter 1:3. We have all of God's love, 1 Corinthians 13:8. Love never fails. We have all of God's grace, 2 Corinthians 12:9. And I want to touch on this last one. And it reads, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, For my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest on me. And I want to focus a little bit on this, because the core thought, the core idea of orthodoxy is that we have all the information. The core thought of orthoproxy is that we always know the right thing to do, or at least we have a what do you call it? We have principles of what it is that we ought to be doing. And that's just not the case. You know, as we saw there in 1 Corinthians 13, we if we had all of it, if we had all of the tongues of men and of angels, but we don't have love, we're a ringing gong or a clanging cymbal. If we have all of the faith, but we don't have love, if we have all of the knowledge, if we don't have love, we are nothing. If we possess if we give all we possess to the poor and exult in the surrender of our bodies, but we don't have love, we gain nothing. We can have all of the right action, and we can have all of the right belief and still fall short. We gain nothing, we are nothing, and we end up just becoming just like adding to the noise, a ringing gong or a clanging cymbal. Now, the temptation then is to say, as Isaiah said, woe is me, I am ruined, I am a man of unclean lips, I live among a people of unclean lips, as my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Now, this is not a bad reaction. We should probably spend a bit of time in this this realization of, wow, we are really insufficient. But the temptation then is to cloister up and do nothing. Shockingly, some of the most unyielding systems and traditions come from this despair about the insufficiency of man. Fueled by deep-seated suspicion both of ourselves and of others, we baptize our traditions so that it is God who commands us instead of man. I'm going to unfold that just a little bit more here. And I want you to think about this. Where this sense of mutual insufficiency ought to have produced a gracious sense of equality, inclusion, and unity at the foot of the cross, it produced instead deep-seated suspicion of one another and what we know or how we act. And so we baptized our traditions as not coming from us, but from God himself, resulting in our current climate of dueling us and them sort of rhetoric. In this way, we assume to borrow sufficiency of thought and action. Remember that our thoughts and our actions are insufficient. We assume to borrow sufficiency of thought and action from God himself. And so long as we hold to tradition, we are acceptable to God. And if we are so convinced that our traditions are based on the inerrant and unquestionable Word of God, we ourselves assume by our adherence inerrancy and unquestionability. It's a really precarious place that we have placed ourselves in. Because, well, as I heard this week, I was listening to a podcast that I generally listen to. I generally agree with everything that they say. But there was just one instance where one of the hosts was really making it out that those believers who are deconstructing their faith and attempting reconstruction just want to make up a faith of their own. And I thought to myself, gosh, isn't that what we've done for 2,000 years? Haven't we just made up a faith of our own? Yes, to some degree, we have our basis in the scriptures, but I mean, look around you. Look at the churches and the organization or the belief systems or our reliance, our over-reliance on orthodoxy and orthoproxy, and we can see that we have gone so far away from the scriptures that we can't honestly say that someone at some point made up our practice, made up our traditions, and then baptized it. So what we have to do is we have to reclaim Jesus. Now, pretty famous passage, John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." Now, this verse, love instigates salvation. Love is the source of salvation, this love from God. As we know from other passages in scriptures, love, God is love. Love flows from God. Everything that God does is born out of love. But also, love instigates obedience. John 14:15, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." Not necessarily if you believe me, not necessarily if you keep my commandments, then I then I know that you believe in me. That's sort of language that we would expect from Jesus partaking in this conversation. In fact, he says of the Pharisees, if you had read the Old Testament, you would have seen me. Or if you had really known, if you had opened your eye, if your eyes had been opened, basically, you would have seen me and you would have known that I was coming. But he says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Love instigates obedience. So I want us to think again here, what do we do when we fall in love? Do we allow just anyone to tell us about the person that we love? Or do we spend time with that person? We write letters back and forth with that person. Sort of the classic human experience is that if our friends don't like that person, sometimes we sort of turn off to them because we're like, well, you don't know them like I know them. You don't love them like I love them. And sometimes that's seen as a bad thing, but maybe not in regards to Christ, in regards to our Christian faith. Is that if we, whenever we're first coming to faith, if we come into church, and as so very often happens, if we're coming into church and sort of some of the old guard come to say, "Oh, that's so cute, he's so excited, he's so in love, don't worry, it'll pass," that sort of thing. It's very sad, because it's not that they have fallen out of love with Jesus, but they've taken what they know about Jesus and they've solidified it. They've sort of calcified in what they know about Jesus, or what they think they know about Jesus, and they now project that on to Jesus. That's not really knowing. That so-called right belief, that's not really knowing. Okay? In any marriage, when you fall in love at the start, you spend your whole time trying to please that person. You spend your whole time like saying, "Oh, what do they like? What's the color they wear?" Most often, sometimes it's really like surreptitious. You're just watching them from afar like a creep, because you want to know the most about them. And again, we don't just take anybody's word for it. And then if other people, we start to meld into their community, into the community of other people who love them, their family, their friends, their loved ones, anybody who absolutely adores this person. But again, in any community, you're going to have those who do love that person, but also start to be suspicious. That love turns kind of into a jealousy, because that fresh love is what they used to have. Now, in reclaiming Jesus as our primary example, and thus love as the basis of all belief, obedience, and unity, we answer the age-old question of orthodoxy versus orthoproxy, in that it's neither. There are right things to believe, and there are right things to do, as there are commands in the scriptures, and what they say. There are things that we prescribed things and described things. So anything that is described is something that we're believing, and anything that is prescribed is something that we're doing. That sort of thing. We do have those things. We do have right belief. We do have right practice, but it all comes from the basis of love. We have in 1 John the basis. So we've focused mostly on belief and obedience, and I don't have any slides for this, but the basis for unity in God is love as well. If you go through 1 John, love is of God, and anyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He that loves not knows not God, for God is love. It's not he who does not knows not God. He who believes not knows not God. The love is the evidence. So we could say that love perpetuates, it begets belief, because God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. We could say that love is sort of the impetus of obedience, but it is also the impetus of unity. It's the heart behind unity.